Welcome to the Radiohead Worst to Best Discography Ranking, where I go through an artist's discography, I rank them worst to best, and I put them in a tier list for you guys to digest. The last place pick is going to be King of Limbs. I don't really like the King of Limbs at all. It doesn't make sense as an album. Coming off of In Rainbows, which is a really good album, King of Limbs doesn't make sense as a progression for them. It feels like a regression back into Kid A Amnesiac storytelling, which I'm personally not the biggest fan of. I feel like Radiohead can just delete it off their discography. Honestly, it doesn't make sense as a placement in their canon. So for that reason, King of Limbs is going to be last place. Next up is going to be Pablo Honey. People love Pablo Honey, and I get why. It's a perfectly acceptable alternative rock album. And in 1993, that's kind of what the sound just sounded like. So Radiohead as a debut just sounded like every other band, which is just teenage grunge, which is not a problem. But compared to the rest of their discography, I rank it lower. You know, it's a fault of mine that I have to contextualize Pablo Honey with the rest of their album when I should be looking at Pablo Honey as an alternative rock album from 1993. But just comparing it to everything else, I think it falls a little short. But I will say Creep is one of my favorite songs of all time. So Pablo Honey is still pretty good. Next up on the list is going to be Amnesiac. Now, I personally think Amnesiac is super overrated, and it's honestly not that pleasant of an experience. I still think it's an okay album. I still think it's better than Pablo Honey. It's a continuation of Kid A. They were recorded in the same sessions. So I kind of see Amnesiac as a Kid A B-sides. Amnesiac can stand alone as an album. It's haunting. It sounds like you're being drowned in a forest. It's very autumn. I might be wrong, and Hunting Bears kind of sound like desert rock, kind of like a Ford commercial. Life in a Glass House is very jazzy, which is something I have never heard from Radiohead so far. Hail to the Thief is next up on the list, and I quite like Hail to the Thief. It's a more musical Kid A to me. Like, there's actual song structure that I can easily digest, and it's not as abstract. Compared to Kid A, it's more acoustic, it's more skeletal, it's somewhat more bipolar than Kid A as well. 2 + 2 = 5 is one of my favorite Radiohead openers, and it is in 7/8 time signature as well. We Suck Young Blood sounds pretty vampiric. The clapping in the song reminds me of the Addams Family snaps, actually. Sail to the Moon has reverby major 7th chords, which kind of remind me of the Beatles' White Album. A Punch Up at a Wedding sounds urban and hip-hoppy to me. Like, Tom York is kind of rapping on the song. For that reason, I think Hail to the Thief is a really good album, even though the entire message is basically fuck George Bush, the album. Kid A is next, and a lot of people would put Kid A way higher on the list, but for me, it was pretty indigestible. I couldn't really understand that album, and I've listened to it multiple times. I get it. I get the context for Kid A. After releasing an album like OK Computer, where would a band go after that? It's their response to being hailed the greatest band in the world. It's a cold electronica post-rock exercise in abstract music with no structure. It's really dystopian and dark. It's super cold. It kind of reminds me of Kanye's Yeezus. It's also like a hybrid of Sweet Trip and Neutral Milk Hotel. I like Kid A lot, and it's a very important album in their discography. But personally, I don't really listen to it that much in my rotation. Next up is the Bends. Usually, in an artist's discography, they have 2 albums that represent the volta of their music. For the Beatles, it was Rubber Soul and Revolver. For the Cocteau Twins, it was Bluebell Null and Heaven or Las Vegas. Radiohead's 2 albums are The Bends and OK Computer. High and Dry and My Iron Lung are some of my favorite Radiohead songs of all time. I love how The Bends sounds. Next up is going to be A Moon-Shaped Pool, which is a pretty recent release from 2016. It's somber, it's wintry, it's longing, it's really cold as well. It's like laying down on the sidewalk while it's snowing and just watching the snowflakes fall. It's similar to Bjork's Vespertine in the way that it's super cold and mysterious, but it has the message of Volnikira instead. It's heartbreaking and pretty depressing to listen to. Full Stop is in 6/4 time signature with a super catchy bass line. And True Love Waits is probably the saddest Radiohead song they've ever recorded. For those reasons, I'm placing A Moon-Shaped Pool in the top 3. Now top 2. I'm gonna put In Rainbows in the second spot. The album flows really well. 15 Step is a really good opener, that's in 5/4 time signature. The track Body Snatchers is a moment in Radiohead where they have not sounded this raw since Pablo Honey. This just sounds like a perfected Hail to the Thief. The musical motifs that they were trying out on Hail to the Thief, they were able to nail it on the head. In my number 1 spot, I'm putting OK Computer. Personally, I think that this is the farthest that rock music can go. It was released in 1997, and their contemporaries were releasing very grungy, sweaty, post-Nirvana inspired rock. But OK Computer sounds really clean, and it sounds futuristic. It sounds pristine. The guitars cut through like a knife. They're incredibly loud. It's as if Radiohead is trying to perform for an intergalactic audience. And the entire album is just very dramatic and theatrical in whole. Radiohead knew that this was going to be a pinnacle in their discography. So yeah, that was my Radiohead album ranking. You don't have to agree with me at all, but I just wanted to share my opinion with everyone.